and welcome back to Travel in Chinese. I'm Mark Rosewell, also known as Dash Shan. In this series, we're following an American family as they come to live and work in Beijing. We followed them through everyday situations like going out for dinner or going shopping, or handling problems like losing a wallet or twisting an ankle. Well, today we're going to start some serious traveling, first in and around Beijing. You know, if you're coming to Beijing, one of the must-see sights, of course, is the Great Wall of China, Changcheng. That's where we'll go in today's dialogue.
爸爸，您知道孟姜女的故事吗？
当然知道了。
人好，你可不知道，他昨天上课的时候刚学了这个故事，今天逢人就问。
爸爸，您既然知道这个故事，就带我去长城玩吧。我来北京这么久，我还没去过长城呢。
老公，我正琢磨周末去哪儿呢？要不我们就带小杰去一趟长城吧。
太好了，爸爸，你说我们能不能找到当年孟姜女哭长城的地方呢？
那只不过是个传说而已，你还当真了？
来，小杰，我考考你，你知道孟姜女是什么朝代的人吗？
让我想想，你难不倒我的，是秦朝的。
对啊，而我们现在可以看到的长城啊，主要是明代修建的。
这么说，传说里的长城和现在看到的长城根本就不是一回事儿。
对，你真聪明。
老公，刚才你说现在看到的主要是明长城，那么明朝以后就不再修了吗？
基本是这样的。从清朝初期以后啊，就不再修长城了。
那为什么呢？
想知道答案呀？那我先问你一个问题，你知道为什么要修长城吗？
我们老师说是为了帮助人们打仗用的。
说实话，我真怀疑长城在战争中能起多大的作用。
在以前啊，长城的确起到过很大的作用，可是到了清朝，长城就挡不住现在的枪炮了。
啊，怪不得清朝的时候已经不再修长城了呢。
爸爸，你说长城有多长呢？有人说在月球上都能看见长城呢。
想知道长城有多长？那你去了以后不就知道了吗？
听你这么一说，我都等不及了，恨不得马上就飞过去看看。
飞？看你呀，都急成这个样子了。
吃晚饭，你还是先去写作业吧。
对，
离周末还有好几天呢。
好吧，现在开始倒计时。
Okay, now let's go over the dialogue part by part. Do you know the story of Meng Jiangnü? Xiaojie asked her father. Well, most Chinese have. It's perhaps the most famous tale about the Great Wall. Xiaojie has been asking quite a few people about this. 现在逢人就问. Feng is to encounter, to come across. 逢人就问 is to ask whoever you come across. 他逢人就说, he says this to whoever he meets. Here Xiaojie uses the sentence pattern 既然 something 就 something else, which is like since or given that something, then something else. 既然你知道这个故事，就带我去长城玩吧. Given that you know this tale, then why don't you take me to the Great Wall for some fun? We studied this pattern a little bit in a previous lesson. 今天你既然来了，我们就一起吃饭吧. Since you've come today, why don't we eat together?
爸爸，您知道孟姜女的故事吗？
当然知道了。
人好，你可不知道，他昨天上课的时候刚学了这个故事，今天逢人就问。
爸爸，您既然知道这个故事，就带我去长城玩吧。我来北京这么久，我还没去过长城呢。
雪梅 is quite interested in all of this. 我们正琢磨周末去哪儿呢? We were just thinking about where to go on the weekend. 琢磨 means to think about or to ponder. 咱们就去长城吧. Let's go to the Great Wall. Notice how she uses 吧 to indicate a suggestion. 咱们就去长城吧. Xiaojie wonders if they can find the location on the Great Wall that Meng Jiangnü visited, where she is said to have wept by the wall. 那只不过是个传说而已. That is nothing but a fable. This is similar to saying, 那只是个传说 That is only a fable. But this sentence structure 只不过 something 而已 is much more emphatic. It's used to minimize or sometimes even to belittle something, to make something smaller. We'll talk a little bit about this more later.
老公，我正琢磨周末去哪儿呢？要不我们就带小杰去一趟长城吧？
太好了，爸爸，你说我们能不能找到当年孟姜女哭长城的地方呢？
那只不过是个传说而已，你还当真了？
The Great Wall is very long, and there are many different sections that were built along different routes in different periods of Chinese history. Huang Renhao asks his daughter if she knows when Meng Jiangnü is said to have lived. 你难不倒我的. Dao is to topple or to overturn. For example, 摔倒, to fall over. Here it's used in a very abstract sense. 难不倒 means to not be able to stump somebody. 你难不倒我的. You can't stump me. I know she was said to have lived in the Qin dynasty, Qin Chao. Now this is the very first unified dynasty in Chinese history around 200 BC. Don't confuse it with the Qing dynasty, which was the last dynasty that fell in 1911.
来，小杰，我考考你，你知道孟姜女是什么朝代的人吗？
让我想想，你难不倒我的是秦朝的。
对啊，而我们现在可以看到的长城啊，主要是明代修建的。
这么说，传说里的长城和现在看到的长城根本就不是一回事儿。
对，你真聪明。
老公，刚才你说现在看到的主要是明长城，那么明朝以后就不再修了吗？
基本是这样。
Let's take a bit of a break now and talk about some of the cultural background that we came across in today's lesson, mainly this fable, 传说, about Meng Jiangnü. This is perhaps the most famous tale about the Great Wall. Like many fables, there are slightly different versions that have been told over the years. The story dates from the Qin dynasty, when China was first unified into one country over 2,000 years ago. This is the time when smaller walls from various kingdoms were joined into one great wall under the orders of Qin Shi Huang. He's the first emperor of China. He's regarded in Chinese history as a great military leader who unified China, but also a very cruel and harsh leader. At this time, many soldiers were conscripted into the army against their will and treated as slave labor. Meng Jiangnü was a beautiful woman who lived in Jiangsu province, far from the capital of China at the time, and also far from the Great Wall, which ran along the northern boundary of the empire. She'd just been married a few days when her husband was suddenly conscripted into the army and taken away by force. Their young marriage was torn apart, and Meng Jiangnü cried every day. Months later, as winter arrived, she prepared some winter clothing for her husband and started off to find him. It was a long journey to the northern regions so far from her home, and at first she had no idea where she might find him. Eventually, she met some laborers who told her that they had worked with her husband building the Great Wall nearby. When she asked of his whereabouts, she was told that he had died just a month ago from exhaustion and starvation. So many workers had died during the building of the wall that they were forced to simply bury the bodies inside the wall as it was built. Meng Jiangnü went to this place along the wall and cried for several days. This is what we call 哭长城. She cried before the wall. Suddenly there was a loud crack and the wall broke open. She found the remains of her husband along with all the other workers and was thus able at least to give him a proper burial. It's a story of undying love and the power of love to overcome all obstacles. Okay, now let's take a moment to go over some of the language points that came up in today's dialogue. For instance, 的确. Now here the character 的 is pronounced 的确. It means really, indeed. It's often used to add some more force to a sentence or a statement. For instance, 四川菜的确很辣. Sichuan food really is quite hot. Now we could say 四川菜很辣. That just means Sichuan food is hot. It's just a statement of fact. If we want to emphasize that, wow, it really is hot, 四川菜的确很辣.
在以前啊，长城的确起到过很大的作用，可是到了清朝，长城就挡不住现代的枪炮了。
根本 meaning simply, fundamentally. It's often used in a negative sense. For example, look at this sentence. 今年冬天 根本就不冷。It's not cold at all this winter.
传说里的长城和现在看到的长城根本就不是一回事儿。
Now, there are a couple of grammatical points that came up in today's lesson that I think would be good for a substitution exercise. For example, how about verb plus 不及? Now, 及 literally means to reach, to achieve. So when it's used in this pattern, it often indicates that an action can't be achieved. It's often used with phrases like 等不及, I can't wait anymore, can't wait for it, 等不及, or 来不及, I can't make it, can't get there, can't make it. Let's look at this example. 烤鸭有你说的那么好吃吗？我已经等不及要去尝尝了。Is Peking duck really as good as you say it is? I can hardly wait to taste it. 尝尝 is to taste something. I can hardly wait to taste Peking duck.
今天起晚了，我来不及吃早饭了。
今天起晚了，我来不及吃早饭了。
他都等不及我把这句话说完，就跑出去了。
他都等不及我把这句话说完，就跑出去了。
Let's look at another grammatical pattern. 而已, nothing more, nothing but. It's often used at the end of a sentence, and it's often preceded by something like 只不过 or 只是 or 仅仅. For example, 我只不过随便说说而已，你还当真了。I was just speaking casually. You took it seriously. I didn't mean it that seriously. I was just shooting from the hip. I was speaking casually. 我只不过随便说说而已，你还当真了。Here's another example. 别生气，只是开个玩笑而已。Don't be angry. We were just kidding, or I was just kidding. Now we could say 只是开个玩笑. It was just a joke. But by adding 而已, sometimes it serves to minimalize something even further. 只是开个玩笑而已. It was just a joke. Don't take it so seriously. Don't get upset. Okay, let's try some substitutions now with this pattern 而已。
我只是随便看看而已，并不真想买什么东西。
我只是随便看看而已，并不真想买什么东西。
我只是提个建议而已，该怎么办还得你自己拿主意。
我只是提个建议而已，该怎么办还得你自己拿主意。
Just about everybody who comes to China wants to visit the Great Wall. Luckily, there are a few sections of the wall that are close to Beijing. And there are a lot of stories that we've heard about the Great Wall as well. The most famous of which is 孟姜女的故事, the story of 孟姜女. Remember, 只不过是传说而已. It's just a fable, nothing more. Well, in the next episode, we're going to go and visit the Great Wall. 我都等不及了, I can hardly wait. We'll see you then on Traveling Chinese. 再见.